there's like a studio apartment with like 8 people living in it. Me and my uncles and my grandma and my grandpa. And my grandpa was freaked out. And my grandpa was the toughest guy I knew. And I was like, wow, my grandpa's scared. I've never seen him scared. And so I told my grandpa when I was 4, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be an accountant and I'm going to fight the IRS and protect my grandpa.
Welcome to the SGV Master Key, a show where you will hear personal stories of triumph over failures and how others successfully navigated the unique landscape that is the San Gabriel Valley. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we have chosen the San Gabriel Valley for our home or businesses or both. We believe it is the people and small businesses that make this community great, and we love to share their stories with you. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at sgvmasterkey.com. Here are the hosts for the show, Russell Mono and Scott Warmoth.
All right, welcome back, SGVers, to another episode of the SGV Master Key podcast. Thank you for tuning in and spending this time with us. We hope to bring you another informative guest. And before we get started, we just want to remind you that we've partnered with San Gabriel Valley Now, your source for city news, announcements, events, special savings, and everything SGV. Go check them out on Instagram, sgv.now, and read their new SGV Now magazine on their website, sgvnow.com. Well, we're not a current events show, but something that's been in the news recently is the IRS. I don't even know how to explain it, but buildup of
additional funding for the IRS, and the IRS has, in recent years, really been sort of ignored, I think, in terms of funding. And, that was a policy decision by the leaders in Washington.
And you mentioned before the show, we were talking a little bit, you had an offer to work for the IRS at one point.
When I graduated from law school, I was offered a position with the IRS in Washington, D.C. I didn't accept that position, but I did. And it's something I would have considered seriously, mainly for the education. Knowing about tax law is a really helpful, beneficial thing. And I would definitely have taken that position if I didn't have other things that were cooking at the time.
Is it common for attorneys to get offers from the IRS?
Oh, sure. It has a huge legal department. Yeah. And plus, they would hire attorneys for all types of positions, not just as attorneys. So, IRS would definitely be a big law employer, legal employer.
Well, if you're not already wondering why our conversation is centered around tax and the IRS, there's a connection with our guest today. Our guest is Isai Cortez, and he's a man of many hats, the founder. He's a tax attorney and entrepreneur, and I'll let him explain all those hats. But Isai, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I sort of mentioned some of those, but why don't you tell the listeners all those things that you do?
Right. So I am a tax attorney. I've been a tax attorney for about 12 years now. Essentially what I do is what's called tax controversy. So people that get audited by the IRS, which is going to be let me rephrase that. It's going to be huge in the next few years now that they have more funding. Kind of like the way that you phrased it in a very nice way as a policy decision. But in my opinion, I think they willfully gutted the IRS, unfortunately, and took a lot of their resources. And so now they're finally getting funding to be able to get back on basically being able to operate, because it's been really challenging for them to be able to operate.
I saw a very interesting article in the Washington Post, and it was online, and so there were videos, and they showed an operation in, I think, Austin, Texas, the IRS operation. It's like going back to the 1930s. I mean,
yep.
They're using old computer programs that basically nobody even knows how to knows the language of those anymore.
Yep.
I mean, they're just in the dark ages, aren't they?
Yeah, and this new funding, part of the money is to update the technology. So it's pretty exciting in my little nerdy world, because I'm actually happy for them. I know people that work there. And so the commissioner Commissioner Rettig is actually, I've met him before several times. Really, I have a picture with him. He's like a really nice person. But he's had a hard time because of the funding, and he's also a Pepperdine alumni, where I also am an adjunct professor, so I also teach at Pepperdine. So it's one of the many hats I have, and so I'm really happy, and it's exactly the way that you think. I once had an IRS agent that didn't know how to use technology, so I'm not going to say where she was, she took a train to a Staples Center and sent me a fax because she didn't know how to use the technology that they were given.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, so you can imagine that in across the whole country.
Yeah,
right?
and you say willfully underfunded, and yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I mean, it was get the IRS, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a nice political position to take. Who likes the IRS, right?
Nobody.
Where are their supporters?
Right.
Right. So
and this was across both parties. So they both were going after them for a bunch of different reasons. Yeah. Yeah. So this is both parties. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the number of wealthy people that are audited. It's virtually 1% maybe or less. Yep. I don't know. And a lot of people don't understand, and maybe you can even talk about this. An audit, can be just a letter from the government.
Yep.
I mean, from the IRS asking for clarification. That's considered an audit.
Yeah, it's a correspondence exam. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you just simply get a letter, they're counting that as an audit in their numbers.
Yep.
A lot of people think audit. The IRS is coming. They're coming to my house, and they're going to look at everything and go to my bank. Does that even realistically happen?
Yes, but not in that formality. It's a little bit different. But yeah, after you get audited and there's a balance due, it's very possible. But it's really funny because some of the memes that were going online showed like they took the hat of like an actual FBI or CIA agent raiding a property, and they put like CPA on the hat, and they put MBA on the hat, and so now it shows and then IRS on the shirt, like to scare people, and that's not the way it works. Does that happen from time to time? Yeah, that's CID, Criminal Investigation Division. So that does happen, but it's not going to happen to Uncle Bob who's underreporting at his manufacturing company. Right, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen to Aunt Karen, who's, maybe not reporting all her income at her burger shop. Right. That's not who's going to happen to. It's going to happen to people that are involved in illicit activities and stuff like that. But that's never changed. That's happened before, So that's always been the case. Like IRS is very involved in criminal investigations.
Well, the famous thing always is, how did they capture Al Capone?
Sure.
The IRS.
Yeah. And that's how they capture a lot of people. Sometimes people don't realize when there's like a talking head on television and they say, we just captured this person, and everyone thinks it's FBI or CIA. If you pay it close attention, it's usually CID, which is IRS, Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division, who's a part of a lot of these exciting news briefs, But you just automatically assume CIA, FBI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, this is exciting getting into this right away. I don't want to steer it, but I want the listeners to know that you do have a connection with the San Gabriel Valley, only because that's our show is oriented around that. So can you touch on that?
I'm going to do my first one is my barbershop is in the San Gabriel Valley, and so that is a premier barbershop in Covina, and that is my buddy Sam, who's pretty amazing. And the reason I kept going there is after I got my haircut. This was after the pandemic, so I hadn't got my haircut in years, right? And then I went and got a haircut, and then after, it was because we were going to hang out with some friends we haven't seen in years and stuff. And everybody kept saying wow, your hair looks really nice. And all the bros came up to me and they were like, dude, who cut your hair, And I was like, it made me actually feel really good about myself. So I was like, so now that's my barber, and I just keep going there, And so that's my first connection. My second connection is I have some clients in San Gabriel Valley. I have some restaurants and different, for my bookkeeping, for my other company that I have, which is a software company and a bookkeeping company that we do. We have a software standalone. Think of it like QuickBooks, but a lot easier to navigate. And then we also have tech-enabled bookkeeping services where we also provide the bookkeeping services. So we do both. So the software, if you want it on its own, but also the bookkeeping services if you want us to do it for you. So that's the other part. And thirdly, which is probably the most important, is my wife is from the San Gabriel Valley. So she grew up in Glendora, So yeah, that's my connection to the SGV.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, let's get back into the tax stuff, because both of you guys seem very excited about it.
It's very exciting.
Yeah. And I'm learning a whole bunch of new stuff here.
Yeah.
Well, you're the expert,
Sure.
That's your job. I didn't follow up.
Sure.
But again, I would just say to people, and I said it to my own kids, learn about taxes. Learn, because, it's a very complex area. And if you can't do it yourself, pay for a professional to do it.
100%.
I've always believed this, because there's just so many potential issues and ways that you can help yourself. And
Sure.
I've just always believed a professional, if it's a good professional, is always worth their money. So
Yeah,
whatever they charge, you're getting a better deal than if you had not done it. So
Yeah, I'm in a weird place in my career where I've built my reputation in my private practice as a tax attorney, and now that I have this startup, I've have great reviews online and all that good stuff, and I started getting bad reviews because I just don't want to work with certain people. And the first time it's ever happened in my career where someone was like, Isai's snobby, Isai is like, he doesn't want to work with me, and I'm like, because it's not a good fit. Right. And so people are, it's not like I'm like, like it's something I want to, but it's not something I can help you with. So it's like a weird place to be in where it's still like makes me not feel good. That I'm like, hey, what did I do? I didn't do anything to you. I just said I couldn't work with you. And so I'm not going to rip you off and take your money for something you don't need. You know what I mean? So I think it's a weird time, but it goes in line with what you're saying, which is, you have to pay for a professional for it. People don't understand that sometimes, right? And they do it themselves, and then they get in a lot of trouble. And we do a lot of that cleanup. So, to sort of bring all this together is that the reason I started my startup is because in litigation, I continued to see the same issue, right? So, you run a law firm, and so you would come to me with your law firm, audit, and it says, we're going to audit your law firm. I say, okay, great. So I'm looking at your paperwork, and I say, okay, cool. You have $2 million of, outsourced work. And you say, okay, cool. And then I look at your profit and loss and I see 1.2 million. You're like, okay, well, that's a discrepancy, right? So then I'll ask you, hey, where'd this other $800,000 come from? You say, I don't know, ask the bookkeeper. I say, bookkeeper, where'd this $800,000 come from? They're like, I don't know. And then they're like gone. Then they don't want to deal with me anymore because there's an error, right? And so what I would say is, I would say, hey, can you try to figure this out? You can't. So I would have to recreate everything and figure out why there's an $800,000 discrepancy, right? Because the way QuickBooks works and all the other accounting softwares, they usually use GAAP accounting, is a profit and loss is a profit and loss, and a tax return is a tax return. They're two different things, but they look kind of the same, but they're not, and people don't understand that. So once you get a profit and loss, you got to get it into the tax return, right? And that's why you pay someone X amount of money to do it. So, you pay a bookkeeper does this, they charge you a couple $1,000. Then now the CPA or whoever's going to do your taxes charges you another couple $1,000 to make sure the tax return is done correctly. Well, after doing so many audits, I started streamlining the process, and I would go to the IRS and I would speak with Chief Counsel, which is the IRS's attorney team, and I would say, hey, look, this is kind of wrong. I redid everything. Here's how I did it. And the IRS would review my paperwork and say, wow, this is really good. They're like, this is very clear. And so I just kept doing that, and all of a sudden my audits went from taking months to taking weeks and days. Sometimes like I would hop in there, and in 1 hour, the IRS would just say, you know what, why don't you just take off for the day, and then I'll sample this work, and if it's correct, then I'll just give you credit for everything that you're asking for, right? And so after I started doing that, I'm like, you know what, why don't I just create this? So that's what sort of gave me the idea to create this bookkeeping software, was because since 100% of small businesses in the US must file a tax return, then why don't I just sync the profit and loss to the tax return? So that's why we're called SyncBooks, because we're the only software that pretty much does the bookkeeping and also gets your tax return ready. So at the end of the year, you have a preview of what your tax return is going to look like. That's something that no other software does. And the reason that we do that is because of what I'm saying is that almost all businesses, pretty much every single business in this country must file a tax return. So it's not optional. You don't have the option to maybe file it and maybe not, right? Even if you don't make a profit, people are like, I didn't make any money. The question isn't whether you made any money or not. it's a reporting requirement, very different than a money requirement or a collection requirement, right? And so that's why we started doing this. And, you know, we created the software, and so many things happened while, you know, I think when you were kicking off at the beginning, you were talking about resilience and like, you know, and like different things that sort of give us the fight, you know. And then my mom got stage 4 cancer, you know, when I started in 2019, and that was really hard, you know, and luckily my mom survived. You know, my mom is a really, really impressive fighter, you know. My mom's a refugee from El Salvador, and so she came to this country in 1975, and so she's a really tough woman. And, you know, then the pandemic happened in 2020 while we're trying to, you know, still get this startup going. So all these little things happen. And then sometime around last year, we kind of found a little niche, and we just started growing exponentially, right? And so we're kind of like in growth mode right now.
With your software?
My startup, yeah. My private practice is still in operation, but I only work with certain people, and I only work with certain types of cases, which are just basically audits. That's essentially.
Oh, is that right? So
yeah.
So you're not like processing returns necessarily?
For the startup, we are.
Yeah.
For the startup, we do the bookkeeping.
But not in your private.
In my private practice, essentially again, this is what led to the idea of the software, was for 5 years straight, pretty much all we did were audits. And so we have a system that works, and it makes sense, and everyone's happy. Clients happy, IRS is happy, it all makes sense. So if it doesn't revolve that, I usually refer it out to someone else. And I have good friends that pretty much take on a lot of different stuff. But for us, we just have a system that works, and that's what we do, essentially, examination. So even if someone was listening to this and they're like, I want to work with you, I would, if it was outside that scope, I would still refer them out to someone that I trust. You're like, hey, this is a good tax lawyer, they know what they're doing. But if someone was getting audited, that would more be in line with something that I would do. Like, hey, you know, the IRS just sent me this scary letter, the IRS just showed up, because they do show up.
Do they do that?
Yeah, they sure do. And that's usually like, it could be, if it's an exam person, it could be a revenue officer, they will show up. And that's because they haven't been able to get a hold of you, not just to scare you. You know, many times you'll find their card at your front door. That means they've actually been trying, and you're like not available. And then sometimes people don't want to answer calls they don't know, because scammers, it's maybe more innocent than it is somebody willfully trying to hide from the government. You know, they're like, I don't know, this number keeps calling me, and they're saying, like, I've gotten calls from scammers saying they're the IRS, and I'm like, sure, what department are you in?
Yeah,
you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Is it too simplistic to say that in an examination, which is that the term for audit?
Yeah, an examination.
That they're just looking for a win-win situation?
So I would say 90% of the agents are awesome. They're not trying to hurt you. They're not. They're literally like, we know there's something up, and so we need to get to the bottom of what the real balance. So for example, you know, you got, we'll go to Karen's Bakery, and she reported $300,000 in sales, but the 1099s are $380,000. So we already know there's an $80,000 discrepancy. It could be innocent, like, oh, those were fees that I paid out to this other company that handles something. It could be very innocent. And so, or it could be like cash thing, or it could be a little bit more like, not that innocent, but still, no one's trying to hurt you, you know? And so most agents are trying to be fair. I've met very few that are just like after blood. You know what I mean? And those are agents that maybe have been there a long time and just are like, or they're lazy, they don't want to do the work, they just want to like close out a case, stuff like that, you know? And so that's kind of how I see that. And remember, examinations come in not only the IRS, but they also come in EDD audits, people that report their employees as independent contractors and maybe they're really employees, you know? Now we just had that, the injunction got denied for the, I think it's AB5. So now, you know, pretty much all these rules apply that and all independent contractors are employees. And then there's exceptions, right? And so that just, the injunction just got lifted, I think like 2 weeks ago, you know? And so that gives the EDD more teeth to come after people. Then you have sales tax audits, right? So then, you know, you go back to Karen's Bakery, and she maybe, because she's selling stuff, she doesn't have to report everything, but if she's also selling hot food, now she has to report some of the sales that are to go or for dine-in, excuse me. So you have different rules that apply in so many different ways. People just think tax is one thing. Tax comes in many different levels, especially if you're doing business in this country, which is unfortunate, you know, that it's not like easier, but this is the way it works. And then again, that's the rules that we have here, and that's how we have to do it. You know?
Do these agencies work together with each other?
No, I've never seen them work together with each other ever. I mean, they work, like sometimes you'll have an EDD audit and a sales tax audit, but they're not working in conjunction with each other. No. Yeah.
You're obviously very passionate about your line of work.
I love this.
Where was that born?
That's probably the best question. And I actually thought about it earlier this morning. So we grew up, really poor, and my family immigrated from El Salvador, and my grandpa was like 4 years. I was 4 years old, so it was 1984. And my grandpa got a letter from the IRS. And he didn't speak English, but we knew that he owed like $400. And for us, 400 might as well have been 40,000 because we didn't have there's like a studio apartment with like 8 people living in it, me and my uncles and my grandma and my grandpa. And my grandpa was freaked out. And my grandpa was the toughest guy I knew, right? Like I grew up without a father. So he was like the toughest guy I knew. And I was like, wow, my grandpa's scared. I've never seen him scared. And so I told my grandpa when I was 4, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be an accountant and I'm going to fight the IRS and protect my grandpa. And that's crazy how that and that sort of need to be a advocate stuck with me even from 4 years old, to want to protect people and stuff like that. And I get to do that, in my day-to-day life. So, you talked about, I wear a lot of different hats, but none of it feels like work. And that's my privilege in this country. Like none of it feels like. I love what I do. I wake up at 4 a.m. and I read up on news, all tax related, because I love this stuff. Reading up on what's happening now with the, the $10,000 and $20,000 student loan, forgiveness. There's a huge tax element to it that people don't know, and that's your gross income.
Yeah, is that going to be taxable?
Well, no, that's not
forgiveness of income. Forgiveness.
It's not going to be
forgiveness of debt
of the student loan debt. Yeah. That's not going to be taxable. But the issue more arises from, let's say, you're independent, John, with your law firm, and because you took out some of these PPP loans and some of these EIDLs and all this stuff, maybe you're above the threshold now. And so you made all these adjustments, or you took earned employee retention credit, all these different things that if you're under 125K, you qualified for this stuff. And now because you did something else, now you don't qualify. So all these rules that were impacted in your tax return can impact this here too. So, it's kind of like unfortunate how all this sort of, we weren't warned about this kind of stuff. So a lot of people may even want to amend their returns now and say, I'd rather do this and do that. Maybe I should have been more aggressive about something. And
because a lot of times a decision that you make, you need to know the whole picture.
Sure.
And you didn't have that information.
Yeah, we didn't know that you needed to make under 125K to qualify for this.
And I guess, people don't realize that you can make decisions that it's not all just straightforward, A, B, C, and D.
Yeah, planning.
There's a lot that you can do, planning ahead, even going backwards in time sometimes.
There's huge tax planning people that work in sort of an industry which is sort of runs in tandem with what we do, but not what we do, right? And so I always advise people, you might want to hire either an estate attorney or even a tax planning person to help you with that kind of stuff, because it's very different than what we do, So all those things kind of like they play with each other, but they're different.
Forgive my ignorance here. Would someone seek out a tax attorney only when they're in trouble?
There's different types of tax attorneys. I'm a controversy attorney, so for me, for the most part, yes. But there's other tax planning attorneys, and then there's tax estate attorneys, right? There's people that are gonna they're sort of transactional type stuff too. So there's a lot of different tax attorneys that operate, and they're different levels too. Like I have a student who went to KPMG to do international tax. So imagine Nike's gonna open up a manufacturing shop in Cambodia. And so they need help on the deals between the US and Cambodia, tax treaties and all that stuff too. So there's different avenues, or there's different roles for tax attorneys.
I see. I remember my friend, I won't mention his name, he went to Harvard and he probably is a tax attorney now.
Yeah.
And we were sort of asking him about that. I guess I didn't dive so much into that, but he said despite his hourly, he wishes he could make a percentage on what he saves his clients.
Sure.
That it was so much more, but that's,
I just had a client who is not local to here, but they just went from EDD audit, and they just went from like 2.2 million down to 300K, right? And we're probably going to get it down under 100K. I'm almost certain, And I worked in tandem with another attorney.
What is an EDD audit?
It's basically they reported their employees. The position of the government is that all these workers were employees, and our position is that they're all independent contractors. And so if they're employees, then you fall into all these different categories and all these different fees and all this different stuff that you have to pay. So you got to imagine, we have the law firm here, you have all your lawyers that you have to pay. So you have all these things that you have to pay, the IRS, the EDD, and maybe even the locality, right? But then you have the plumber that comes and charges $3,000 to fix the plumbing here. You just pay him $3,000, that's it. And so those are easy to separate. But what if you have another attorney that comes and does some work, but it's different than the work that you do, right? So things like that, they start to get a little bit more in the gray area. Maybe he does a little bit of what you do, but maybe he focuses more on forensic, research. I'm making up stuff, right? Yeah. And so all of a sudden you can start to blur the lines a little bit, right? And so that's where it gets a lot harder to do, right? But when you're talking about percentages, when I think about someone like that, I'm like, wow, I charge my fair rate, but boy, did I save them a ton of money, you know what I mean? And so I'm happy for them. And for me, I think it's always a marathon, not a sprint. So my happiness would be if they referred someone else to me, right? And so they're like, we trust you, right? You could have took advantage of us.
I've seen my own CPA because he's, a personal friend as well as my CPA. And, I hear stories all the time about, and I'm kind of seeing it happen, how he's saving really millions of dollars for people.
Yep.
That, one person saved millions of dollars in taxes that they didn't owe, but that the government wanted to collect.
Yeah. I think, over the last 2 years, a lot of us tax professionals are, including, I'm sure your friend too, we're burned out from all this.
All the changes, right?
It's hard. It's
He's burned out.
Yeah,
I know.
If you imagine the Titanic or a big ship like that continues to have to make sharp turns, it's hard because you're steering the whole country. And it's not like a local, it's not just for this. If you think of it's going to impact these people are millions across 50 states, thousands of different communities, thousands of different subcultures. And so now we got to try to align everyone with doing this one thing. And it's so challenging. And we have clients even a client that texted me today, I remember we were on the phone and, in not a rude way because he's actually became my friend. He's like, why am I paying you for this one thing? And he didn't say it in a rude way. He's just like, I don't understand why I have to. I'm like, well, if you want me to do this, I have to charge for it, right? And then he's like, fine, but he was thinking it would be simple. Then I got on the phone with him on a 3-way call because I needed him to authorize me. After the call, he texted me, I see what I'm paying for, right? Because it's really, really hard. The government isn't just like, hey, how's it going, friend? Let's do work together. The government's more like, they're overwhelmed too. They're underfunded. And that's sort of where a lot of this stuff comes from. What I was talking about is that they're really they're stressed out too. So we have all these professionals and government employees that are really stressed out. So we have the saying, we have a little crew on Twitter. We call ourselves Tax Twitter. And the funny thing about Tax Twitter is that we all call it March-ternity, because March is when we went into pandemic mode, and that's when they've been making all these changes ever since. And so we'll call it March-ternity day 700 and something, because it's always, even the new thing that happened yesterday, we're all griping about it, because it's we don't know the full picture. So just like you're saying, we're thinking, okay, this is a picture, so we plan like this. And now they're like, nope, here's another thing that you need to think about. And now we're like, great, add another variable to something. That's really hard. It's hard on the taxpayer. And then who bears the burden? We do, right? Because the clients are calling us like, hey, what's going on? And we're like.
And you didn't even know. I know there was the PPP whole process.
Sure.
Banks and professionals didn't even know how going into the program, banks were paying out money and not even really knowing how they'll get the money back, how the government is going to support the program, how it's supposed to be treated.
Yep.
And finance professionals like you
yep.
would have no idea.
Yeah.
It was
a crazy time. And even during that time, I had someone committed fraud on my behalf, right? And so I was dealing with that, with fraud during that. Somebody used my name and my phone number. Oh no, my name and my address, and they got PPP loans and all this stuff under my name. So I had to like deal with that. That was a whole nother headache. So I'm sitting there showing the government like, hey, I don't know who these people, these are not my clients. And they were so bold that I got a call from, and this is crazy. They gave out all this money. No one ever called me to say, hey, did you prepare this?
Oh, they were just writing
checks. Yeah. Finally, I got a call from a mortgage company. They're like, do you know this person? I'm like, no. They listed you as their account. I don't know who that is. And then it turned out to be part of this like syndicate that was like stealing money. And they were so bold. They were trying to get a mortgage to buy a house.
It's just probably we'll never find out how much fraud occurred in the last 2 years.
So much.
I mean, it was just, I don't know, billions and billions of dollars. Just pretty much just blank check.
Yeah, people were buying Ferraris and I don't know if it was true or not, but I saw this one on like Twitter where somebody put like PPP loan on their Ferrari or PPP on the Ferrari license plate.
Now that's pretty stupid.
That's dumb. There's a lot of stories of IRS agents being in their normal capacity, seeing something suspicious and writing stuff down and following up on it. Like imagine being in a small town and someone pulls up in a Lamborghini. Well, they'll be like, I'm an IRS agent. People normally don't have Lamborghinis in this. They'll write down the license plate, go back. And that's a true story. It does happen. Yeah, like those are real stories from the IRS. They're just like, this is odd for my community. I'm not used to seeing this kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Isai, we ask each guest to bring an item of significance with them. What did you bring with you today?
Okay, this is going to be the one that I wanted to share about. So I shared with you all I grew up without a father. And so I got to celebrate my son's birthday. I don't know if you can see here. And it was his first birthday because he's 3 years old in the pandemic. And so I got to be, I never grew up without a father. So I never had a father be there for my birthday. So I got to do that for my son with all his little friends. And so he had an amazing time. So that was for me like extremely significant for me.
Where did you hold that?
It was at my house.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So all the kids went swimming and you know, it was like 3:15. He couldn't even take a nap. He takes a nap all the time, like 2-3 hours. And it was like 45 minutes. He was like, where's my friends? We're like, we have to hold on, buddy. And then he was like, friends, where are you? You know? And so it was, it was the best day of his life, you know? And so I think for me, that was extremely significant to sort of like, you know, maybe a cliche or maybe, you know, some of the Gen Z type terms, but it was, you know, breaking generational trauma. Like I don't have, just because I didn't have it, I don't have to beat that into my kid or anything like that. I get to like change and make a change here moving forward. So for me, that was extremely significant.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So he was 3 years old there. But that was his first party.
Actual party. Yeah. We've had adult stuff, you know, like, you know, the uncles would come or something like that. But we haven't been able to have a real party with kids because, you know, even last year, my daughter turned 4 in November 2021, but it still was kind of like, it was a new Omicron, you know, it's like a new virus and people are just, so we just had family over and maybe a kid or two, but this was like an actual, like all the kids and it was chaos. It was complete chaos. It was like 14 little kids, you know, but it was his smile and his happiness. And he slept for like 13 hours that night. It was awesome because it was just like, you know, he felt so celebrated, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, you know, when we first talked about coming on the show, I wanted to get your input on what has happened now with the funding, but we sort of started the show in that. But how is that going to impact like the regular person here in the San Gabriel Valley? Because how would you describe you know, there's a lot of small business here, right? A lot of working class families. How is it going to impact, in your view, the average person here?
Okay, I'm going to talk about the pros first. The pros first are going to be that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be able to help them. That's the pros. So San Gabriel Valley, usually examinations are done by El Monte or downtown. So,
there's an El Monte IRS office.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, on Flair.
Yeah, off Flair.
You know where Flair is?
In El Monte, yeah, off Flair, there's a IRS office there. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where usually most of the examinations in this area happen. Sometimes downtown will handle, it just depends on the amount of work. So the positive part is that if people get notices, they'll have staff and there'll be more people available to help when they call. So that's going to impact these people. What people don't want to hear is that there's probably going to be more examinations, more audits. And so, again, I'll go back to the pros about that, is that instead of one agent having 70, 80 cases where they can barely handle them, it go back to normal where there was like one agent who handled like 30 to 40 cases. And so then that means the people will have more time to help you close out your audit and stuff like that. So that's the pro in that regard. But if you look at sort of what the IRS was saying, they're very clear that there's going to be more audits. So that's how it's going to impact people. So when I talk about small businesses in this community and in any community, but specifically the SGV, is make sure exactly what you were saying. Make sure you have a professional. Make sure you pay someone to help you, you know? If you're uncertain about the people, make sure you get even a second opinion, you know? I understand how small business operate. Many times I've had clients where it was like uncle doing the bookkeeping, and then uncle used to do financial stuff a long time ago, but then your business grows. You used to make, you know, $300,000 as a trucker, but now you got a whole trucking fleet. Now you're making $12 million. Uncle can't handle that anymore. You got to switch and find someone new. So I've seen this happen so often. You know what I mean? And so my point in that story is, once you see something that growth, go hire a professional. That's like the number one thing. And so that will keep you. You know how many audits I get from CPAs? Maybe like I have like 1,000 audits under my belt. And so I maybe had like 10 CPA audits ever.
What does that mean? CPA?
Let me refer. Yeah. So when I mean there was a CPA involved who did the books and they still got audited. Everyone else didn't have a CPA or had someone who was unlicensed do the books, or they did it themselves, you know? And so then they got in trouble. But for the most part, when there's a CPA involved or a licensed professional, it's rare that they get audited, because, you know, someone will tell you like, don't do that. Or like, hey, if you don't have all your 1099s, I'm not gonna file this for you. You know, like you need to give me all your paperwork. And, you know, and so then the people will be like, I don't wanna work with them because they're being too stringent. Well, that's not too stringent, that's the rules, you know? And so things like that. So that's the number one thing I could say to people in this community is make sure you hire someone. And if you can't afford someone, you got to really think about like how to make that a necessary expense. Just like you need to pay the rent at the restaurant, how do you pay the CPA to help you in this, or whatever your professional you hire?
So you said you had 1,000 CPA audits. So these are
like about 1,000 audits under my belt, and maybe only 10 have involved a CPA that did the work.
Does that mean that their work was not good, or they missed something?
I mean, actually, probably a few times it wasn't even bad work. It was just like the IRS was auditing them because the client was more involved in not giving everything to the CPA. The other ones, actually, I had one where I have had a few audits where nothing happened, you know? And so sometimes it is just random, but rare. And that was sort of one of the other points I wanted to talk about earlier before I forget. For the most part, none of the audits are random. You were literally outside the standard deviation, meaning like there's the bell curve, everyone is in here and you're on the wrong side of the bell curve. And there's so many people here, they can only audit this many of those people. And you just happen to be randomly selected from this part of the bell curve, you know? And so, and when I'm talking about these people, almost all of them didn't have a CPA. And those are the people and so the CPA people is very rare, very rare.
Well, there you go. That's the question that I wanted to know is how is their selection process, right? So if you're outside of the norm, you're already in what they would target, and then it's just a matter of
what they can afford to audit. And so now, maybe they were auditing this many, and now they're going to be able to audit that many from this many because of all the new funding.
And so when you're saying that curve, what are the extremes?
It could be anything, like your 1099s don't match, or let's just say you have 50 law firms in this area, right? 50 law firms. And you got to think about it like this. And you have like, all the law firms have rent payments of 7 to 12%. Your rent payments are 40% of your income. That's, you're outside. You're not in the norm, right? Why are you outside? And, and additional other factors as well. So they can easily just gauge all the law firms by, your code. So now you got the code. So these 50 codes in this area, and then all the numbers are out there, and you're the only firm outside that for rent payments. So why is your rent so much more expensive than everyone else? You're in that pot now,
So they're going to ask for information on your rent payments.
And they can even look at other stuff too. They're going to look at more stuff. No one ever usually just does one thing. There's usually rent that looks weird, some other stuff, car payments that maybe start to look weird, some more other stuff that starts to look weird, and they're going to audit specific things on your examination. But I'll challenge the IRS quite often, because when they do give me a specific line item 1, 7, and 14, and I give it to them, and then they start asking me about 2, 3, and I'm like, I start fighting with them. And not because I want to be contentious.
Outside the scope of the examination.
Audit. Yeah, because why are you doing that? Why didn't you tell me that at the beginning? I'm happy to give you everything. But now you're making me do more work, because now I gave you these 3 things you asked for, and now you're asking me for 4 more things. That wasn't the scope. So why are you I haven't even given you anything yet. You haven't even seen that my client has done anything wrong, but like we're meeting in person, everything starts to add up, and now you want to do more? No, I'm going to challenge you. I want to talk to your manager. Like, I just want to challenge you, because I don't want you to do that again. If I'm going to give you those 4 other things you're asking for, it's going to be the last time you're going to ask for it, right? So I want to challenge. So those are the things that when you're playing the game, you have to be mindful of how you do the audits. And that's sort of what I've crafted over the period of time, is I don't always want to come with that oomph, but sometimes you have to. Sometimes it's more like you're gauging the relationship with the examiner to try to bring this to a close and fair for everybody. I'm not trying to cheat the system, obviously, that's not my objective, but I also want to follow the Internal Revenue Manual that tells you how you're supposed to conduct the audits. And if you're outside that, like the manual tells you, here's how you're supposed to do it. Like, it's accessible to everybody in the country. So when they're like acting outside of that, I'll call them out on it, because the manual says specifically, here's how you're supposed to do it.
In your line of work, do you foster relationships with these agents out here?
You can't. It's really a big no-no, but what's that?
Like, let's just say, like, you're familiar with them, not
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the difference. Like, I know some of the people from Chief Counsel in downtown LA. Went to law school with some of them, or we went to the same law school. I actually, they've spoken at events I've spoken at events for them, and so, but it's not like we hang out after or anything like that. That's a really like kind of like not looked right upon. You know, it makes sense, right? It makes sense. But there are agents and lawyers for the IRS that I've become cool with, in the sense of like we're fair with each other, and I've even litigated with the people that I like they have their position and I have my position, and I'm like, are you not going to give me this? Or like, you're going to have to go to court. And I'm like, and I'll challenge them. And then sometimes they're like, no, we're going to go to U.S. tax court and we're going to litigate the case. And we have before, and I've litigated with people that I like. And I don't take it personal. I'm like, they have their position, and so I've had to bring people to come testify, and I've done that. So I also litigate cases too, but that's rare, that we do that. But usually they're fair, but sometimes the facts are a little bit iffy, and so they want you to testify to the facts under penalty of perjury, So, yeah.
Is that where you would call like a forensic accountant?
I mean, forensic accounting is quite an interesting term. I would say here, you're not really looking for that. You're more like someone says that they did something. We have no proof that they did it, so they're going to go testify that they did it or that something was happening. To sort of corroborate what we're trying to say is a element of a rule that we need to be applied to. Yeah.
Okay. Well, who knew tax would be so interesting?
I'm honored that you guys are saying that, because people always think it's so boring, but I'm like, this is exciting for me. This is really fun. Yeah.
One of my favorite classes in law school was tax law.
Yeah.
Which was not a required course, and it's one that you
should be.
Yeah, should be. Well, it probably should be. Yeah.
Well, I'm really fascinated in learning so much here. But let's take a quick break, and we'll come right back. To thank our sponsor, Warmoth Law. At Warmoth Law, they believe that just because you speak a foreign language, come from a different culture, or simply don't know how to navigate the legal system, that should not prevent you from compensation from injury or receiving benefits. They've been helping SGVers like you for over 38 years. Visit law888.com or call them today at 626-784-7017 and tell them you heard about them on this podcast. All right, we're back with Isai. Isai, at the break, we were talking about another thing that you're involved with, Casa. Why don't you tell the listeners about that?
So Casa is a community that sort of was developed during the pandemic. So, there was a bunch of people online, and we're all like, what the heck is going on, right? I still have like a line. I was in that Whole Foods where I was like 300th person in line, right? So we're all like, nobody knew what was going to happen in 2020, right? We're all like, 2 weeks, they said. And then, 2 months later.
Just flatten the curve, right?
2 months later, we're all still like trying to figure out what to do next. And so a bunch of people from Casa, from this community, we just started meeting through Zoom, and it was a bunch of, Latino and however people, identify in that community with Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, and all that different stuff. And so, Chicano, and that's how I met Carlos. So we all sort of, Carlos from Mestizo Coffee, which is actually a staple in my house. And it was really cool because I sent a bag to, my wife is Korean. She went to Korea in May. And so my wife's cousin took a picture with the Mestizo coffee because he was like, it's really amazing. Then my wife's aunt got upset because I didn't send her a bag. So I owe her a bag of Mestizo coffee because she's like, why didn't I get one? and so, we started, talking on Zoom, and it's become like quite a vibrant community. And it's a lot of leaders. You have a lot of Ivy Leaguers, a lot of business owners, a lot of tech people from FANG companies. You have like I was saying, founders and entrepreneurs. So the community became very vibrant. And so a lot of the things that we do is a place for us to like support and uplift each other. That's the main thing that we do. And so we called it a Casa because for a lot of us, it was reminiscent of like a place where we felt like we belong. And so for us, the home is a very like special thing for like Latinos. And so, we have like the living room where all the adults and the children hang out. Then we have like the private rooms where you go hang out with your favorite cousins. So we have like, we're all based off a Slack server at the moment. We may be moving to a more private or not a more private, maybe a more public online community. But, we have the little groups that we sort of attribute to being in your favorite room with your cousins. So maybe there's a room for people that are from LA. Maybe there's a room for people that are founders. Maybe there's a room for people that are lawyers in our community. So it's become, we have people in Chicago and Mexico and Houston and San Francisco and Miami and in Dominican Republic. We have people all over that are just like, they come and they join the community, and it's like really, really a fun time. Yeah. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How often do you guys meet?
We just had an event this last Friday at very grateful for the Mofo law firm. They hosted us at their downtown event, and we just all met and invited a bunch of people, and it was for the LA Tech Week event that they just had last week, and it was one of our events, and it was really fun. So it was like, it's just random. Sometimes we'll meet in different countries, it's just a really cool community. So yeah.
Well, so you started on for Zoom, but then you guys got together.
Yeah,
and
we
met
started
in person.
we started getting together, and like it just became like this literally very vibrant community of people that are just like connecting with each other. And there's been people that joined forces and founded companies together. There's millions raised on there. I mean, millions. Like, I think we value the founders at over like $400 million of like what they raised at and what their valuations are. So it's like a really cool community. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. 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 And then we just keep it fun. It's like, it's not meant to be anything. It's more like, you grew up eating beans and rice, but at the same time, these people went to like Harvard and Yale, and they're lawyers and they're doctors, and we're just like, but we get where we came from, so we all can sort of also gauge where we're at the moment too. So it's really fun. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I it sort of sounds like a mastermind group of sorts, right? Like you guys just sort of get together like that. But Isai, thank you for sharing that with our listeners. We're going to segue on to part of the show where we learn about your favorite things in the San Gabriel Valley.
Okay.
So you've talked a little bit about your connection to the San Gabriel Valley, and we'd like to find out what 3 of your favorite things, places, or memories, or any connection with the valley.
I need like 300, right?
Yeah,
I need
right.
like 300
right.
because there's so many things that I love. And I'll say first, for sure, Mestizo coffee, right? Like that's staple in my house, and we drink it all the time, and it's like my wife's favorite coffee, and it's mine.
And
so.
This was Carlos, previous guest of ours.
Yeah.
Episode 66.
66,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, Carlos became a really good friend too. So he and I spend time together, and we hang out together, and that's quite nice. Number 2, I would say, gosh, have you guys been to Top Tracer Golf?
No.
Up, I think it's in Glendora or Azusa, one of the, I can't remember where it's at. But it's not, I like Topgolf, but I like Top Tracer more. It's the same technology, the same company. So you're playing golf, you know, it's like a video game, but you're actually hitting it into a range. So then it tells you where you land so you can play different courses. And it's so much fun. Like, I really, really enjoy it.
So it would be maybe the size of a driving range?
It is a driving range,
okay.
but that they converted to a Top Tracer. And so I went to Topgolf in Ontario. I didn't enjoy it very much. It just wasn't fun for me.
What is Topgolf?
Topgolf?
I mean, I've heard that often.
Oh, yeah,
I thought it
it's
was just
new.
a driving range.
Yeah, it's new. It's actually like, it's new to SoCal. So I think here in El Segundo. But it's like this big old stadium, and then you like hitting the ball into like the little places it tells you to hit it.
Oh, okay.
And it's really fun. Like, you can hang out with your friends and have a space and order food. Really cool. So this Top Tracer is a little bit different because it's outdoors more. The other one's outdoors too, but it's like open outdoors. So you have indoor to outdoor. Here you're just in a regular driving range, but you can order food, you can hang out with your friends, and it's so much fun. I actually really enjoy it.
Is there competition? Can you compete with your friends?
Yeah, you can play games. So like, you know, you'll say 3 people, and then everyone hits in their order.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And is it like just playing a round of golf?
It can be. You can also play different
there's
games.
other variations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I like playing the round of golf. So
how do you putt if you're on a range?
You don't putt, you chip.
Oh, okay.
So like, if you have to putt, let's say you're like 5 feet. So depending on where you have to chip, then the hole gets bigger or smaller. So if it's really close to the hole on the game, then you have this much room. If it's really far away, then the hole gets smaller. So you have to chip it closer to like the 50-yard or something like that. So it's really fun.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And definitely a first on our show.
Yeah.
Hearing about that.
Yeah, it's so much fun.
So say the name again is?
This one, I'm trying to remember the name of the actual course, but it's Top Tracer. You can't miss it.
Top Tracer.
That's the name of the technology.
And you think it's in Glendora or Azusa?
Yeah. It's in one of the two. Yeah.
And then a third thing.
Third thing, I'm trying to think. Like, there's so many restaurants, and we moved from Highland Park to Diamond Bar. So we used to go to Alhambra all the time and buy food there. So I would say maybe, and I can't remember the name. Cannot remember the name of the bakery. It's like a number.
Oh, 85 degrees?
Yeah, that place. That taro bread is my poison. I can't eat it. It's like 700 calories of pure joy. But it's not good if you ate 1,000-calorie dinner and a 1,700-calorie taro bread. So when I'm going to eat my taro bread, it's got to be very strategic of when I'm going to eat it. But that bakery is like, it's like my...
Where did you see it? Which one were you talking about?
The one in Alhambra. That's the one I used to go to.
Right on like Main Street.
Yeah, because we used to go eat at the restaurants there. Yeah, exactly, on Main Street. So I used to go to the Peruvian restaurant. Again, eat a 1,000-calorie meal, and then go to 85 degrees and eat like a 700-calorie bread.
Oh, how is that place? I've been meaning to go there.
It's amazing.
It's amazing?
Amazing, yeah. It's really, really good. And the owner is a really nice guy, and the food is really great. And then we used to go to the restaurant across the way, the Chinese restaurant. It was like where they make the soup for you, and they mix all the stuff into like a spicy soup, like Good Earth or something like that. Earth Cafe. It was one of those. It was across the street from the Peruvian restaurant.
Okay. A hot pot?
It was, but it's like only one small. It's not like a big old hot pot. It's just like one bowl for you, and you get to pick like the ingredients, and you pick like one or two proteins. And we loved it because it was like she got what she wanted, my wife, and I got what I wanted. And it was amazing. And then you like dipped us. It was great. So, yeah. So I used to go in that little area all the time.
85 degrees. I think that's also a first, right?
Yeah, it is.
On the show.
Right. And there are several of those.
Oh, there's several.
Too.
Yeah. I love that place. I actually went to one in Taiwan too. When we got married, we went on a baby moon, and we went to Taiwan, and we went to 85 degrees in Taiwan. Oh, wow. Yeah, it was awesome.
Do you know the story behind the name?
A little bit. You can go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead.
No, I mean, I just, hearing it from like one of the owners. I don't remember. Go ahead.
I think it's the perfect temperature for a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
That in their mind, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I think I remember hearing it was in one of the stories that we read in Taiwan. Yeah.
Which is strange, right? Like if you never, I forget who told me that. I think maybe Albert, because that's Albert's client is 85 degrees.
Okay.
But yeah. So anyway, Isai, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights into tax and obviously your passion and your software So can you remind the listeners about, how they can reach you and your software and all those things?
Yeah. So I would say for the software, if people that are interested in like bookkeeping type stuff, I would say you go to app.syncbooks.com, SYNKBOOKS, app.syncbooks.com. And then if they want to reach me more for like my private practice, you can go to bismarktax.com, BISMARKTAX.com. So it just depends on what people are looking for. And, if someone is looking for maybe something in that arena, they can contact me and I can point them in the right direction, even if it's not something I can help them with. Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to this episode. And as always, you can reach us at sgvmasterkey.com and email us at info@sgvmasterkey.com. And we will see you again very soon in the next episode.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the SGV Master Key. You can find the full back catalog of the SGV Master Key at sgvmasterkey.com and wherever you get your podcasts. This show was produced and edited by Russell Mono and Victoria Allers of Kind Monster Productions. Thanks again for listening or watching. We'll see you again real soon in the next episode.
Nice mother. No, kind mother.